So today we're dealing with March 23, variant 42, question number 3. This is a question on oligopoly. Usually oligopoly का जो question आता है वो purely oligopoly को deal कर रहा होता है. So similarly in this one we have same situation. It says some firms in oligopoly markets choose to collude rather than engage in price competition. And this will lead to higher prices and less efficient allocation of resources. So question का एक डायरेक्शन है. डायरेक्शन is कि firms जो है वो collusion prefer करती हैं price competition के ऊपर, and उसकी वजह से जो है they have the ability to charge a higher price and they are less efficient in the allocation of resources. Okay, so the main question is about collusion versus price competition. We've said before also कि जो 20 mark का breakdown होता है, you get 14 marks for assessment objective 1 and assessment objective 2, and you get about 6 marks for assessment objective 3, which is evaluation. ठीक है? This one was knowledge and understanding and a bit of the analysis. That's how the breakdown is done. 14 marक्स को आप लेवल्स के अंदर ब्रेक डाउन करते हैं. सो in order to get a level 3 near 14 marks or completely 14 marks, you have to make sure that you answer every bit of the question. जैसे इसके अंदर ये purely oligopoly के ऊपर है, तो obviously we have to define oligopoly, उसके कुछ features, उसके कुछ fundamental features like how few dominant firms होती हैं और वो सब एक दूसरे पे interdependent होती हैं and all of that. Then we want to talk about collusion versus compete. तो collusion के अंदर we can deal with a couple of things, जिसमें एक cartel model आ जाता है, जिसके अंदर एक price leadership model आ जाती है, वो collusion हो जाती है. And if they compete, तो वो kinked एक demand curve model बनता है. ठीक है? सो क्या वो collusion करते हैं या वो compete करते हैं versus them going into a price competition. तो जब हम प्राइस कंपटीशन की बात करते हैं तो ऑब्वियसली वी वांट टू टॉक अबाउट ऑल दोस थिंग्स जहां पे फर्म्स की प्राइसिंग कंपटीशन के अंदर आ जाता है, जिसके अंदर प्राइस वॉर की भी बात हो सकती है. But the key question, after everything that you are explaining, you're writing your paragraphs, you have to continuously go back and say कि देखें जी, मैंने कहा था कि इसकी वजह से prices will be higher and we will be less efficient. So बार बार आपका answer needs to connect to the question. And then in your evaluation, then we can talk about that. No, it does not lead to higher prices and more inefficiency. In fact, you can have lower prices also, and you can end up at uh, much higher efficiency, dynamic efficiency. Long run में usually dynamic efficiency की ही बात होती है. So how should we start this essay? The first thing is we want to go over a little, we want to talk a little bit about oligopoly and its features. So this is what I would do. We'd start like कि जो oligopoly है, and oligopoly is a market structure. Is a market structure ये बात लिखना जरूरी है. ओलिगोपली को जब आप समझा रहे होते हैं ना, डोमिनेटेड बाय अ फ्यू firms, बल्कि few large firms, and each with a significant market share. Will they all be equal market share? No. सबका इक्वल मार्केट शेयर नहीं होगा, बट ये जरूर होगा कि अच्छा खासे बड़ी परसेंटेजेस होंगी कि कलेक्शन ऑफ देम will lead to a higher percentage of the industry's output. ठीक है. Also, uh, these firms are interdependent on each other's decision. ठीक. You can give some examples because आजकल जिस दुनिया में हम रहते हैं उसके अंदर majority जो है, you have uh, oligopoly companies. आपके पास मोबाइल नेटवर्क्स हैं पाकिस्तान के अंदर. यू हैव यू फोन, मोबिलिंक, यू नो, देन यू हैव एयरलाइंस, यू हैव ऑटोमोटिव, ऑटोमोटिव ऑटोमोबाइल हो गया, पेट्रोल हो गया. पेट्रोल के अंदर भी यू हैव ऑल दीज ब्रांड्स. सो वी वांट टू लाइक सॉर्ट ऑफ suggest कि ये सारे, मेरे ख्याल में व्हाट वी शुड इवन डू ओवर हियर इज कि we may propose one of the features कि इसके अंदर product type क्या होता है, right? So oligopoly firms may produce similar goods like petrol or differentiated goods like cars, you know. So इस तरीके से हो सकता है. One of the statements after this, what I would also say is that, because I should have done this with the first paragraph, but because there are a few dominant firms, each must consider the likely reactions of rivals when changing prices or output. See, so something like this, just to suggest that, at the end of the day, उनको एक दूसरे को देखना पड़ता है. So this sets up my stage for what's coming next, कि वो collude क्यों करना पसंद करेंगी versus compete. So just to give के collusion के अंदर क्या possibilities they might have, I would say something like that in a oligopoly, firms can either compete or collude. Okay? Collusion क्या होती है? Collusion occurs when firms who operate rather than compete often by agreeing to fix prices or like limit output or even like share markets. अब वो मिलके oligopoly firms they can collude. Now this can be formal, by the way. This can be formal collusion or an informal collusion. राइट सो अब मैं क्या करूंगा इसके अंदर आई थिंक टाइम फॉर सम डायग्राम्स टाइम फॉर कि फॉर्मल collusion में क्या होगा सो इफ आई वांट टू टॉक अबाउट लाइक द कार्टेल मॉडल जो बेसिकली शो करता है कि दे गेट टुगेदर फॉर्मली एंड दे डिसाइड कि दिस इज हाउ द मार्केट्स विल वर्क तो उसके अंदर हम अपना एक डायग्राम बनाएंगे ठीक है प्राइस क्वांटिटी डिमांड कर्व एमआर कर्व एमसी का कर्व एंड वी गोइंग टू शो कि किस तरह से ये मोनोपोली के अंदर कार्टेल्स जो हैं बेसिकली दे गोइंग टू डिसाइड देयर ओन प्राइस because when they get together this is what they do they act as a cartel compared to a regular scene and I can explain this that so in a formal collusion the large firms will formally agree to combine efforts and act like a monopoly. Their demand curve will become the industry's demand curve. उसके बाद they'll collectively choose price based on profit maximizing rule. ठीक है so this is sort of like how they're going to do it. ये cartel model के अंदर है. But remember, we need to go back to the question to see कि are we actually answering our question? तो यहाँ हमें नजर आ रहा है कि once we've talked about this cartelling का idea, now we gotta connect it to the question which was कि वो collusion करेंगे rather than price competition and that will always lead to a higher price and lower efficiency. So I want to connect now. अच्छा in comparison to if these firms competed like in perfect competition, then they would have produced where P is equals to MC. ग्राफ में मार्क कर लेते हैं वो P equals to MC किधर है so this is where perfectly competitive firms would have produced right and the price would be lower while quantity be higher. So we see that in conclusion, there is higher price and lower quantity. Also, in terms of allocative efficiency, it is where P equals to MC and these cartels will produce where P is greater than MC, hence they are allocatively inefficient. तो ये हमने एक बात को प्रूफ कर दिया कि देखें जी, जब ये फर्म्स आपस में कोलूजन करती हैं तो कोलूजन करने में यस दे आर चार्जिंग अ हायर प्राइस एंड यस दे आर एलोकेटिवली इनएफिशिएंट. परफेक्ट कंपटीशन के केस के अंदर जब डिमांड और सप्लाई की बेसिस के ऊपर आप प्रोडक्शन कर रहे होते तो देन दिस वुड नॉट बी द केस. फिर P इक्वल्स टू MC होना चाहिए था और आपको एलोकेटिव एफिशिएंसी अचीव होनी चाहिए थी. We feel कि यहाँ पर because this is not enough, what we also need to talk about is कि you can go for an informal wala also. So I'll do that also. Then let's talk about that if they don't formally, because in many countries you cannot go for a formal collusion. तो अगर आप इनफॉर्मल collusion के लिए जाते हैं, जैसे कि वी हैव द इनफॉर्मल या tacit कहते हैं इसको. So when you have an informal collusion, उसके अंदर हमने एक मॉडल पढ़ा है जिसको हम कहते हैं द प्राइस लीडरशिप मॉडल. तो इसमें भी क्या होता है कि इसमें बेसिकली जो लीडर फर्म होती है वो भी एक तरीके का collusion ही है बाय द वे. सो वी माइट नीड टू एक्सप्लेन दैट आल्सो. मेरे ख्याल में मैंने ऊपर एक ब्रीफली बात की थी फॉर्मल और इनफॉर्मल के बीच में. बट व्हाट नीड्स टू हैपन इज कि हमें यहाँ पर इसको मेंशन करना पड़ेगा कि जब इनफॉर्मल collusion होती है, लेट्स से दिस इज द डिमांड फॉर लीडर, लेकिन मार्केट की ना, दिस इज वन ऑफ दोज डायग्राम्स जो सिंपलर वाला मैंने थ्योरी में कराया हुआ है. इन बुक्स दे आर मच मोर कॉम्प्लिकेटेड वंस, तो हम थोड़ा सा सिंप्लीफाइड वर्जन को रखेंगे इसके अंदर. सो दिस इज व्हाट वी आर डूइंग. डिमांड फॉर लीडर वर्सेस द टोटल मार्केट डिमांड. ये आपका मार्जिनल रेवेन्यू फॉर लीडर हो गया, जो इसका एग्जैक्टली यू रिमेम्बर हाफ वे हम बनाते थे इस तरीके से. और फिर उसका मार्जिनल कॉस्ट आ गया. ठीक है, मार्जिनल कॉस्ट फॉर द लीडर. सो इफ द लीडर फर्म इज प्रोड्यूसिंग अ गुड तो उनको एक सर्टेन कॉस्ट स्ट्रक्चर तो होगा. सो बेस्ड ऑन MR इक्वल्स टू MC, दिस इज द क्वांटिटी द लीडर विल प्रोड्यूस एंड दिस इज द प्राइस द लीडर विल चार्ज. ठीक हो गया. सो फार द लीडर, अगर अगेन वही बात हो रही है कि हम इसमें collusion की बात कर रहे हैं. सो द लीडर इज डिसाइडिंग कि मैंने क्या क्वांटिटी बनानी है. The leader is deciding कि मैंने क्या प्राइस चार्ज करनी है, ठीक है? And then the rest of the market, they're going to take the price of the leader, let's call them followers, so the price of follower, और फिर उसके बाद जो भी मार्केट के अंदर डिमांड है, देन ये टोटल मार्केट की डिमांड हो गई। तो मार्केट की डिमांड में से लीडर की डिमांड को अगर आप माइनस कर दें, तो यू विल बी लेफ्ट विद the follower key market. And this is what the explanation again can be कि अगर firms go for an informal collusion, so in the informal collusion as shown by the price leadership model is that the leader uh, decides the price based on its profit maximizing objectives of MR equals to MC, and the followers will take that price, will take that price and go into non-price competition. अब नॉन प्राइस कंपटीशन के अंदर um, they can compete for they can compete through advertisement, branding, sales services, quality based, so at least they're not competing in price. So हमारा जो question था, so after I've given the theory, I need to go back to the question, which was कि when they collude, the prices are higher in comparison to competition and they are inefficient. तो इस केस के अंदर भी हम यही बात करेंगे that is true, that we can see that even in this collusion, the prices are higher and firms are producing at output where P is greater than MC. We can see it in our diagram. Here are price or here are नीचे marginal cost. So firms, therefore, they are allocatively inefficient. ठीक, so this is how it's gonna be. I remember when we were checking this sort of an essay, uh, एक जो interesting इसके अंदर था, that was the kinked demand curve model, which sort of like is an outlier which says कि आप collusion नहीं कर रहे हो. Kinked demand curve is about compete, that firms go into competition with each other. But उसमें एक और चीज ये होती है कि even when the firms are going into competition with each other, they end up setting a higher price in the market, you know. So उसके लिए वो हमारा kinked demand curve model आता है and the whole idea of the price rigidity. So I want to talk about that also because I find that interesting that even if firms compete in oligopoly, they end up price fixing as shown in the kinked demand curve model. सो इसका एक ग्राफ बनता है हमारा. सो किंग्स डिमांड कर्व मॉडल के अंदर रिमेंबर द मॉडल्स लिमिटेशंस भी हैं. लिमिटेशंस लाइक एक प्रिवेलिंग प्राइस होती है मार्केट के अंदर. लेट्स मार्केट ए. देयर इज अ प्रिवेलिंग मार्केट प्राइस, and at that price there is a quantity that is getting sold. The problem is उस प्राइस से ऊपर डिमांड कर्व इज इलास्टिक और उस प्राइस से नीचे द डिमांड कर्व इज inelastic, which shows that, from the firm's point of view, there is a price rigidness, inflexibility that they have to face, which is that if the price tends to increase the price, the competition will not follow and the firm will lose a lot of market share. And as a result, the firm is going to end up losing revenues. And similarly, even if the firm tries to lower the price to capture the market, turns out everybody else also lowers the price, and you don't end up gaining too much of the market share. तो दोनों एस्पेक्ट के अंदर the firm ends up losing revenue. So what they'll do is they won't go for a price competition. They'll keep their prices at PO into QO, and they will continue to do business over here. Um, so I will write that once a prevailing प्राइस इज सेट, ये मैंने बहुत ही आर्बिट्रेरली एक प्राइस डिसाइड कर ली है मार्केट के अंदर. जैसे भी अगर आज हम बात करें पेप्सी की क्या प्राइस है, एंड वी से इट्स 80 रुपीज. ओके, सो let's say if it's 80 right now. So if Pepsi wants to increase the price, what's going to happen? If they want to decrease the price to capture market share, what's going to happen? Turns out in either cases, they're going to lose money. So they're just going to keep it where they are. तो एक तरीके से जब वो इवन compete करने जा रहे थे, तो turns out that the price gets fixed. So once a prevailing price is set, um, and firm tries to increase price, the competition will not follow, and since demand curve is elastic, the firm will lose revenue. Similarly, if the firm tries to compete and lower its price, the competition will follow, and so firm will not gain volume. Their total revenue will fall. So firm will keep prices the same. अब इसके अंदर ऑब्वियसली इस मॉडल के अंदर और भी बातें आ जाती हैं। फॉर एग्जांपल इसके अंदर हम जब इनके एमआरस को बनाते हैं, तो दिस इज हाउ एन एमआर लुक्स लाइक। इसका डिमांड कर्व का एमआर इस तरह से बनता है, ठीक। और फिर उसके बाद एक एरिया ऑफ डिसकंटिन्यूटी होता है और इस तरीके से एमआर बनता है। और फिर हम कहते हैं कि देखें जी, जो इसके मार्जिनल कॉस्ट्स हैं, दे विल फॉलो थ्रू दिस एरिया। एंड टर्न्स आउट कि ये फर्म जब प्रॉफिट मैक्सिमाइजिंग भी कर रही होती है, even if it is profit maximizing, it is not going to mess with the prices. It is just not capable of doing that, because in either cases they're just going to lose um, revenues, maybe even their profits. The firm will continue to produce where they are. Again, going back to the question was that even if they try to compete in terms of prices, yeah, even if the oligopolies try to compete, um, they're going to end up with higher prices and again inefficient, because see, price is above marginal cost. So even if they are competing, that would be my last evaluative statement for this one, that in this model, firms do end up with higher price and allocative inefficiency, because price is greater than marginal cost. So you got to connect this, right? That's the important bit that we have to connect. और बार बार हम इस तरीके से एफिशिएंसी की इसके अंदर बात करते हैं। वन ऑफ द थिंग्स, बिकॉज मैं सिर्फ और सिर्फ एलोकेटिव एफिशिएंसी की बार बार बात कर रहा हूँ, एंड आई कंप्लीटली लेफ्ट productive efficiency on the sideline. So what I want to do is I want to bring that in also and have a little explanation of that, कि अच्छा इसमें भी क्या होता है कि collusion के अंदर may also lead to productive inefficiency. And let me introduce another efficiency, X inefficiency. We'll see that in chapter number 7. I've talked about it, but let's give you a little brief as to एग्जाम के अंदर आप किस तरह से लिख सकते हैं. So when firms face less competitive pressure, they have less incentive to minimize costs or innovate, leading to waste and managerial slack. So, like for example, a dominant collusive firm may spend more on advertisement, administration, or luxury offices, increasing average cost unnecessarily. right? ये X inefficiency होती है, by the way, जो wastages आप you end up doing wastages. So, however, oligopolistic firms may also choose to compete through non-price competition, such as branding, product differentiation, improved customer service. So while price remains high, such competition can enhance product quality and consumer satisfaction, partially offsetting allocative inefficiency. So these are other things that we can also talk about. So we know that in the short run, collusion typically, sorry. So in the short run, collusion typically results in higher prices and less efficiency than in firms competing on price, because it restricts output and limit consumers' welfare. तो ये हम तो बात कर चुके हैं, and we've done some models on it. I think काफी extensive हो गया है. We should move into the evaluative statement for this. अब जहां तक evaluation की बात है, also evaluation needs to be reasonably well thought out. Uh, but जो आपकी evaluation का discussion होगा, that needs to be on के oligopolies do not always go for collusion. And even if they do go for collusion, that does not necessarily result in higher prices and more inefficiency. They may achieve a different form of efficiency, जिसको आप dynamic efficiency कहते हैं. ओलिगोपलीज जब एबनॉर्मल प्रॉफिट्स कमाती हैं तो वो वाला पैसा R&D में लगाते हैं, रिसर्च डेवलपमेंट में, प्रोडक्ट इनोवेशन में, प्रोडक्शन प्रोसेसेस की सोफिस्टिकेशन में, जिसकी वजह से इन द लॉन्ग रन दे आर एबल टू प्रोड्यूस अ बेटर क्वालिटी प्रोडक्ट, मच लोअर प्राइस प्रोडक्ट, and end up achieving dynamic efficiency is what we call, right? So पहला पॉइंट हमारा, और फिर उसी बात को लेके what we can say is, uh, so from an evaluations point of view, okay, so we say like, despite negative effects, there are potential benefits of collusion that could improve long run efficiency. So, for example, by earning abnormal profits, firms may have greater funds for research and development, leading to dynamic efficiency. Over time, innovation may reduce production costs, improve product quality, and eventually lower price for consumers, obviously, for consumers. So ये मैंने एक अपना counter argument किया कि देखें जी cartelling will not always lead to inefficiency and higher prices. They can achieve dynamic efficiency and that can actually lead to lower prices. So ये obviously possibility है. एक one of the things that we always write about larger firms is moreover larger colluding firms can benefit from economies of scale such as bulk buying or reduced duplication. ये नेचुरल रिसोर्सेज के लिए ज्यादा यूज होता है. डुप्लीकेशन ऑफ फैसिलिटीज. अभी एक ही सामने क्या हो रहा है कि एक ही रोड के ऊपर चार किस्म के बैंक्स हैं और जब फर्म्स आपस में कलूट कर जाती है तो ऑब्वियसली यू नो this would sort of be more in the case of a merger वैसे तो. But if they can see that yeah, already there are two banks and we're pretty much the same and the services are same, then maybe you don't need to be there, so you can move in some other area जहाँ पे वो नहीं है, you know. So this can lower average costs, you know, if these cost savings are passed on to consumers. Prices may not rise as sharply as expected. ठीक. So that could be one of the things. इसके अलावा evaluation के अंदर there are government regulations also जिसके अंदर गवर्नमेंट्स जो है inclusive organizations की they can monitor pricing and they can prevent their excess profit takings, or they may even like break up the cartels. So reality के अंदर it is quite possible that you may have these things. So for example, competition authorities in many countries, Pakistan में भी है by the way, competition authorities. which may impose fines or enforce behavioral remedies to ensure कि markets जो हैं वो contestable रहे. They don't get polluted or something like that, right? So one of the points that you can also talk about is how uh, government regulations may also not allow firms to collude through imposing fines and make sure that markets remain contestable. तो ये एक बात हो सकती है. Um, Remember, collusion is not always so bad. Sometimes it is quite possible that collusions can actually provide stability to the market also. कि वो इतनी डिस्ट्रक्टिव प्राइसिंग नहीं करें और प्राइस वॉर्स अवॉइड हो जाएं जिससे ऑब्वियसली कंज्यूमर्स भी हार्म हो, प्रोड्यूसर्स भी हार्म हो, बिजनेस क्लोजर्स हो जाए, अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट होना शुरू हो जाए. सो दे डो इन अ वे वी कैन से कि ये लोग थोड़ा सा स्टेबिलिटी भी लेकर आ सकते हैं. तो in reality, most collusive arrangements leads to higher prices, and they do lower the quantities. They are inefficient in consumer welfare, you know, but they do have some good things also. जिसके अंदर R&D और economies of scale करके they can actually achieve economies of scale, lower the prices, be more innovative. So I think that would be like one of your conclusive statements for an essay of this sort. ठीक? So from the marking scheme point of view, let's see what they want in the answer. Number one, the key characteristics of oligopoly. Key characteristics are interdependence, few dominant firms. ठीक है? That is the major thing जो इस structure के अंदर है. Then you can talk about the products and horizontal, similar or differentiated. You can even talk about, I should have talked about that. I didn't talk about it, but the barriers. There are significant barriers to entry for new firms to enter the market, um, and even for the existing firms to leave the industry. तो ये आपके market के कुछ characteristics हो गए. Collusion should be explained and compared to the alternative of price competition. So that's what I did also. I did your cartel model जिसको मैंने price competition से compare किया कि कैसे higher prices और inefficiency हो रही है. मैंने informal collusion का भी उसके साथ किया और मैंने compete का भी show किया कि किस तरीके से they will end up charging a higher price. Some explanation of what is meant by efficient allocation of resources वो P equals to MC और उसकी basis पे हमने बात की. You could have talked a bit more also on that as a separate explanation. Analysis of the link between collusion, higher prices, and allocative efficiency. We did that for every single model we did. Analysis of alternative price and non-price comparative approaches, जिसके अंदर हमने बात की कि छोटा सा पैराग्राफ था, but we did include that how firms not only do price-based competition, जो king demand curve में था, but they also compete in terms of branding, product innovation, and things like that. A large dominant organization may have less incentive to operate efficiently, and inefficiency might occur. We spoke about that also कि large firms के अंदर X inefficiency, productive inefficiency की chances होते हैं. फिर उसके बाद uh, then we went into the evaluation. Evaluation के अंदर they're saying कि when they increase in the size, they have some opportunities. We did not write this. They can provide wide range of goods and services, and consumers can have more choices. Oligopoly के अंदर we wrote about dynamic efficiency. इसके अंदर they're saying कि एक supporting diagram बन सकता है. Dynamic efficiency का simple सा diagram है जो हम LRAC का curve बनाते हैं ना, उस LRAC curve को नीचे shift कर दो. That is basically your dynamic efficiency. And क्योंकि average cost गिरेगा तो chances are that the firms may lower their prices as a result of that. Then we're talking about economies of scale, how managerial economies or bulk purchase. I think I mentioned bulk purchasing की मैंने बात की थी. So that's fine. Then they're talking about government interventions and regulations हो सकती है जो कि cartelling को रोक सकती है. Right. So, yeah, along that line, and then a final conclusive statement about there are goods and the bads and pricing के ऊपर along with efficiency. So I think we've done a pretty reasonable essay. It should be similar to this. But remember, in your essay, a lot of times in A2, what happens is you say कि अच्छा oligopoly पे question है and higher prices or efficiency के ऊपर है, and you give a lot of theory. But every time you're giving a model or an explanation, you are doing the whole theoretical aspect of it. But unfortunately, you miss out on connecting to the question. आपके हर explanation का आखिरी line और आखिरी two lines should be to connect कि मैंने आंसर कर दिया क्वेश्चन को कि देखें जब आप कोलूजन करते हैं तो यस यू डू लीड टू हायर प्राइसेस एंड यस यू डू लीड टू इनएफिशिएंसी. तो हर मॉडल को आपने बार बार उस चीज के साथ कनेक्ट करना है. इवन इन द इवैल्यूएशन यू डू दैट एंड आई थिंक वी हैव डन दैट कि देखें जी जब बड़ी फर्म्स हो जाती हैं तो दे डू एंड अप एट लोअर प्राइसेस थ्रू इकोनॉमीज ऑफ स्केल or through dynamic efficiency, or maybe even like government regulations might force them to charge a lower price. So, that's how it would be answered. So we did a pretty reasonable essay here.